There is, unfortunately, in the United States, a movement catered specifically to people who value their own, I guess, moral or ideological purity over the actual effects of politics. That's the unfortunate reality. People valuing more so the how their vote makes them feel, how their participation in democracy makes them feel versus the actual outcomes of those votes. And so that brings us to kind of the question, right? In a two-party system, right, where there is a two main sources of political power in the country, who do you vote for in a national election, right? To me, the answer is pretty simple, and that's that pretty much every single election is an exercise of harm reduction. Your goal in an election is to be able to pick the candidate that is going to either do the most good things or hurt the least, right? And by and large, the political party that has a monopoly on hurting the least and doing the most incremental good things is the Democratic Party. And the unfortunate reality is we live in a time where the margins for success are not that huge. We need to be able to get as many people as possible out to vote for the Democratic Party. Because the alternative, and there is only one real alternative, is not Cornel West and the Green Party coming in to save the day unexpectedly with, 60% of the national vote and carrying us away into a glorious socialist future. That is not the actual, that's not an actual outcome, right? The actual outcome would be Donald Trump winning the Republican, both winning the Republican nomination, but then winning the presidential election and putting him in a position to be able to essentially end democracy. Now, this isn't just me idly saying, oh, well, Donald Trump, if he won again, could end democracy. And that's actually not, that's actually pretty on point. Here's Bernie. If you don't want to take my word for it, take Bernie Sanders' word for it. Here he is, okay? 2-minute clip from CNN here. Talking about, hey, if Democrats don't win in 2024, we might not have democracy anymore. Here we go.
Sanders, Cornel West, who is a close ally of yours, he is running a third-party campaign for president. He recently criticized you for endorsing President Biden's re-election.
Well, thank you very much for the 3 gifted tier 1 subs, Kai Ryu. I very, very much appreciate it. Thank you so much. And if other people want to gift subs and donos too, that'd be really lovely.
Listen to what he said.
I love the brother, and you even in love, people have deep disagreements about these things. But I think, again, he's fearful of the neo-fascism of Trump. People look at Biden, they don't really want to tell the full truth. He's created the best economy that we can get. Is this the best that we can get? You're going to tell that lie to the people just for Biden to win?
What's your reaction to that?
Well, my reaction is that certainly is not the best economy that we can create. That was what my speech was about yesterday. We've got to join the rest of the industrialized world, guarantee health care to all. We've got to cut the cost of prescription drugs in half. We've got to raise the minimum wage to at least $17 an hour. We've got to build the affordable housing we desperately need. But where I disagree with my good friend, Cornel West, is I think in these really very difficult times where there is a real question whether democracy is going to remain in the United States of America. Donald Trump is not somebody who believes in democracy, whether women are going to be able to continue to control their own bodies. whether we have social justice in America, we end bigotry. Around that, I think we have got to bring the entire progressive community to defeat Trump or whoever the Republican nominee will be, support Biden, but at the same time, which is what I did yesterday, is demand that the Democratic Party, not just Biden, have the guts to take on corporate greed and the massive levels of income and wealth inequality that we see today.
So, yeah, no, that is ultimately Bernie Sanders, in a very nice and indirect way saying, no, actually, like, fascism is something that we should, by any and all means, oppose and resist, because guess what? If we get fascism, there is no improving the economy.
Vote blue chat.
Thank you very much for gifting us up this Sheckley, Kyryu. I appreciate that. But there's no democracy if fascism takes power. There is no, oh, well, we'll just, organize the unions to push for better wages. No, your union gets killed. Union members get executed in the streets. Like, what are you talking about? There is no, like, if you have the option between, like, a democratic but deeply flawed capitalist system and a fascist system, you can make changes and improvements to a flawed democratic capitalist system. You can organize labor in that system. You can organize voters in that system. You can consolidate political power and make changes. That is, by the way, why Marx talked about utilizing bourgeois democracy to facilitate changes towards a more socialist system. But you can't make those changes if fascism is in power, because they just kill you. They kill you. They burn your libraries. They shutter colleges. They force you underground. You think it's hard to organize a workplace now? Good luck organizing a workplace when you have to keep it secret from, like, the Gestapo, okay? Whatever American Gestapo Trump comes up with. It's probably going to be the Border Patrol. But ultimately, the situation is not one where we can just gamble on the outcome. Gambling on fascism is exactly how the Weimar Republic wound up collapsing to a minority of fascists. The far-left elements of the Weimar Republic refused to align against the fascist elements of the Nazis, and they eschewed an alliance with the liberals, and guess what happened? The Nazis were able to take power, and then they killed the leftists. They killed the unions. They killed anyone who disagreed with them, socially or politically. And if you think that can't happen here because of, because we're America, the military would step in or something, you are naive. You are rolling the dice on whether or not we have either, because again, there are only two options, either we have the flawed democracy and infected with capitalism that we have now, and we continue to be able to make incremental changes, we continue to be able to consolidate power, and both political and economic power, as well as class power, and we are able to continue to further our gains, or the other option, again, is not Cornel West taking power and, like, ushering in the Glorious Revolution. That's not what happens. The other option is fascism takes hold. And once it takes hold again, we have deeply flawed and ancient institutions in the United States. And those buckled to basically the farthest extent that they possibly could without breaking when Trump was in office last time. If he gets in office again, they will break. He knows now to put true believers in positions of power. And those true believers are going to listen to him when he makes demands of them that would result in the overthrowing of democracy, that would result in a fascist coup. He learned from his mistakes. So, what I'm trying to say here is that I'm about to be really, really angry about a segment on The Rising. Yeah, we're just gonna hop into it. Okay, we're just gonna hop into it. Here we go.
Leftist commentator Kyle Kulinski is being accused of shaming 2024 Green Party candidate Cornel West for running outside of the party duopoly. Let's watch.
Now, on the Cornel West front, look, understand something. I would like to talk to him and ask him, what do you think you're doing here? Like, what do you think you're doing here? Do you actually think you can win? Because you can't, because we don't have ranked choice voting. We still have first past the post voting. So what's your highest goal that you think you could achieve? Is it the 5% for the Green Party? Is that what it is? So that you can get matching funds and make it more viable? But again, I hate to tell you, the Green Party and no third party will be viable unless and until we get ranked choice voting.
Kyle is 100% correct. Kyle Kulinski, I've had disagreements with him in the past, but this is 100% correct. When Kyle is talking about how essentially the only way we break the two-power duopoly is by getting ranked choice voting, he is unequivocally correct. Without ranked choice voting, there can be no multi-party in the United States. It just doesn't work. The math doesn't check out. The statistical models that have been run on, our particular voting system deliberately lead to a two-party duopoly.
Bass Jack needs a based beat. BWAH.
Thank you very much for the 5 gifted subs. I appreciate it. Oh, I didn't say world peace. No. Now we won't get world peace. Why text to speech? But for real, the reason we need ranked choice voting is not just because it's a random talking point. It's because the math of ranked choice voting is directly different from that of first past the post. Most places use first past the post, meaning that if whoever takes the most votes, that's it. You win. With ranked choice voting, you get to rank your choices, and then all of those choices get taken into account when the voting is tallied, which opens up the possibility of multi-party systems, because you can put as your first choice, the Green Party, your second choice, the Communist Party, the third choice, the Democratic Party, the fourth choice, nothing. What you abolish government, whatever. Like, that's how it works. It is able to account for a multi-party possibility that first past the post simply cannot. How can we hold the party accountable if you have to vote for them? You participate in the primaries. You have to participate in the party. See, this is a good question, Captain Ginyu Frog, because a lot of people simply just check out the rest of the year, or the rest of the election cycle. But you got to participate in the primaries. You got to get involved in local, state, and national level politics. You got to volunteer. When you do these things, you become closer to the levers of power. You become more familiar with the power apparatus, and you are able to facilitate changes and organize other people who think similarly. By doing that, we can take the levers of power away from the people within the Democratic Party who currently wield them for nefarious purposes. The way that you take power is that you work within that system to actually make it happen. Or alternatively, you organize on a state level to get ranked choice voting so that ranked choice voting can enable a multi-party system. What I'm talking about right now is the fact that we don't live in a world where we have ranked choice voting universally, which means we don't have a possibility of a multi-party system. And second of all, the Democratic Party, and I can tell you this because I have organized with members of the Democratic Party, I can tell you they don't listen to people who don't vote for them. If you are simply going to go vote Green, they don't take your opinion into account. The information that would change their mind is by getting more involved in the party. That is what changes their mind. Which, by the way, the other leftist organizations recognize. This is why the DSA runs Democratic Party candidates. Because by integrating the DSA into the Democratic Party, they are then able to get closer to the levers of power, make more substantial changes, and consolidate their own power in a way that is actually effective. I'm sorry, Jack, I only vote based on what's funniest. I have, you've stymied me. You've played the ultimate chess move of just like pulling your pants down and farting on the pieces until I don't want to touch them. I just it's an effective chess strategy. No one's ever tried it on the international level. Simply lick your opponent's pieces. They won't be able to play the game. You've taken control of them. Anyway, sorry. But yeah, no, you gotta participate. The ultimate idea of voting currently in a two-party duopoly is harm reduction. And, flawed as he is, Noam Chomsky, had like a really good quote on this. And that quote is, turn up to vote. Kyrie, thank you for gifting Woe Kenny a sub. Getting the white names out of here. But Noam Chomsky had a great quote, which is, show up and essentially, I'm going to paraphrase, turn up to vote once every 4 years, once every 2 years, vote in the primaries, but that should not be the only thing that you do, we all have skills and talents, and most of those skills and talents can be used to help consolidate power and change things within the Democratic Party for the better, That's ultimately where we're at. Or you can use your skills and talents to organize people on the ground to get ranked choice voting. But those are really the only two viable paths forward. Because the alternative is weakening the support of the Democratic Party. And if the Democratic Party doesn't win in the two-party duopoly system, we get fascism currently. This isn't like in like the 1980s where like, well, if the Democrats lose, the Republican gets in office and they're just going to do neoliberalism as well. No, this is if the Democrats lose, we get fascism. It's not just neoliberalism or neoconservatism anymore. It's fascism. And if that happens, I'm sorry, like people are going to feel a lot more let down and underserved under fascism, where people are getting killed in the streets. Anyway, that's my rant. We are less than a minute into this video. Let's continue.
Because until that point, there's always going to be this perception you're just a spoiler candidate.
100%. The two-party system is the problem. And I do advocate, by the way, please look into where efforts are in your state to get ranked choice voting. Because if we get ranked choice voting, the entire political calculus of America changes. But until that happens, we are in harm reduction mode. And we don't have the luxury of just turning up our noses and saying, well, the Democratic Party isn't good enough. I'm sorry, it is good enough by default because it's not fascism. like throwing ourselves over the cliff into the volcano of fascism doesn't help us.
And by the way, if we get into a general election and it's Biden versus Trump, and Trump ends up winning because Cornel West got 5% of the vote or something, or 3% of the vote, and he gets blamed, that's going to set the movement back so much. People are going to look at leftists as spoiled brats who are just getting in the way. Now, that's totally separate from the question as to whether or not the spoiler effect actually is real. But there's going to be a perception that it's real, and everybody's going to blame the left for Donald Trump winning.
I mean, honestly, if Cornel West was able to pull about 6% of the Democratic voters over to him, I think that would realistically pose a severe threat to Biden's reelection campaign.
Kulinski's viewers are calling this a mask-off moment for the YouTuber, since he pretty much said the exact opposite 2 months ago.
The backlash that's happening online, there's a decent amount of backlash where people are like, what are you doing? Like, do you know, like, who these people are? And then I see a lot of people making a point, which I think is a fair point, which is like, if you're going to run as a Green Party or an independent, because the Green Party, for example, I think the last election they had ballot access for 48 states.
Yeah, they have a real organization.
Yeah, even like the Libertarians have between like 48 states and 50 and all the states. Yeah. You know what I mean? So as far as third parties go, the only ones that are even remotely viable, and I use that term loosely, is the Green Party and the Libertarians.
And by the way, the Libertarian Party is a joke. Like, it's like I think I saw a story not that long ago that like the Libertarian Party in New Hampshire like nominated someone, like got him on the ballot because he gave them like $25. Like it's ridiculous.
I mean, you also have, DSA out there, which has never fielded a presidential candidate before, but they have, chapters nationwide, and it's a real organization with some sort of, infrastructure that could...
By the way, DSA actually has, like, membership and ability to do things. I think, last I checked, what is the membership of DSA? Last I checked, it was close to, like... membership. Let's see. How many members? Oh, they have over 92,000 members and chapters in every single state. Yeah, no, like DSA actually can do things. The Libertarian Party is a joke. Like, it's such a joke that Sam Seder literally probably could win the Libertarian Party nomination, which is hilarious, and he should do that. But the Green Party is such a non-player in any level of politics. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, what is Green Party membership even at? Oh, okay. It has 234,000 registered voters. Not too shabby. Not too shabby. But I also they aren't doing anything. I have not seen them do a single goddamn thing, and my job is to pay attention to politics. He could and should. I agree. Just the meme would be incredible. Vote Sam Seder for Libertarian president. DSA is not a political party. No, it's a political organizing party. So that's probably why there's such a distinction between Green Party and DSA.
Theoretically be mustered behind you.
Back in 2020, he tweeted, "As a left-winger who will not vote for Biden, I want you to know I'm 100% okay with you."
So this entire story is being angry at Kyle Kulinski for changing his mind to the more correct position.
Blaming me if Trump wins a second term. I mean it. Blame me. Then get to thinking real hard how you're going to get me to support your candidate the next time. Maybe even ask me, I'll tell you. So Kyle Kulinski may be a little bit hypocritical. I don't know, Jessica. That original tweet that he sent talking about how he wasn't going to vote for Joe Biden and he's fine with being blamed for Biden losing because he refuses to support him, and then criticizing someone for daring to run as a third-party candidate seems pretty inconsistent.
It seems really inconsistent if you ignore literally everything else that's been happening, and also the fact that he's been consistent up until now, and he just recently changed his mind because he's been thinking more about the 2024 election. Like, this isn't like rocket science. This isn't even like the meme of the lady doing like calculus in her head or trigonometry in her head. This is just guy realizes he's wrong, specifically in this instance where the alternative is fascism taking power.
I don't know Kyle Kulinski's background.
Yeah, Trump's facing like 97 charges right now. What are you talking about?
I don't listen to Kyle.
Yeah, he came out and said I was wrong and changed his mind, like, officially. Just, man, dude.
Kulinski. I don't know anything about him, but I can judge based off of what he has said there, that he has not spent a lot of time as a grassroots organizer. And I think when you're a political commentator and your commentary isn't routed in facts, in data, or the perceptions of...
I would not say that Kyle is in the pro-Biden camp. I would just say that Kyle is saying, hey, if it comes down to Trump or Biden, you should vote for Biden in this election, which I don't think is pro-Biden. It's just anti-fascism. If you consider yourself any kind of anti-fascist, voting for Biden is the anti-fascist option. It's kind of my position where I don't like Joe Biden, but I hate fascism way, way more.
Of the public or a political movement, you tend to get led astray. You tend to contradict yourself. And that's really what we see happening here. If you are someone who believes in what Cornel West's platform is, which I assume, and I'm sure his audience does as well, assume Kyle Kulinski does. But the argument he's making there is about viability of the movement, viability of the campaign that Cornel West is running. And he's complaining that if this doesn't go well for him and he pulls 5% of the vote or what have you, and it's...
Okay, by the way, I like Jessica Burbank generally. I think she's pretty okay. I haven't seen a ton of her content. But I do want to say that, like, trying to defend Cornel West based on his policy positions is not really the way you should go, especially when his policy positions fit on one page. This is the entire policy page. Right here. This is it. He has 3 policies on his website. Dismantling the empire, vastly cut back on military spending, dissolve non-defensive security alliances, including NATO and AUKUS, which, by the way, NATO is specifically a defensive alliance. It's a non-defensive security... That's NATO! That's what NATO is! And dismantling the global network of over 800 military bases and severing the link between U.S. foreign policy and corporate profits to respect national sovereignty and the principle of self-determination for people. The USA should be a decent and dignified nation among nations rather than an imperial power dominating every corner of the globe. I agree. I agree with this, but keep in mind, this is not a policy position. Withdrawing foreign aid to Egypt, Israel, and other countries, violating the human rights of subjugated peoples, increasing humanitarian aid to poor and vulnerable peoples around the world, enabling international peace by highlighting ecological sustainability, abolishing nuclear weapons, and promoting diplomatic processes. These are not policy positions. This is like a wish to the universe to manifest a better world. These aren't, like, realistically, I'm sorry. In the real world, the president can't just issue an executive order to dismantle every military base on Earth. in the real world, that would not have beneficial consequences, actually. Yeah, we'll just real quick, we'll run in and dismantle the military bases in Taiwan. Yeah, exactly. A policy is something that outlines how you will do something. These are just, these are just like your like, it'd be nice if these happened. Yeah, and subjectively a cat, exactly. That's another excellent point that I was going to bring up for another segment, but we'll bring it in here. The United States military is one of the largest employers in the United States. The United States military-industrial complex, also included in that, one of the biggest employers in the United States. You need an actual plan if your goal is to dismantle the military-industrial complex. Because, again, it doesn't work like the president walks into the Oval Office and goes, "It's time, boys. I'm about to Thanos snap away the U.S. military. Ka-thunk." It doesn't work that way. And not only does it not work that way, but even if it did, if you Thanos snapped away the entire U.S. military-industrial complex, the economic, the political, the military consequences of that would be uncalculable, So, while it's nice to have these goals in mind, this isn't a plan. Saving the planet. Fighting back against the escalating ecological catastrophe by targeting the corporate greed of fossil fuel companies and resurrecting the Green New Deal. Shifting from extraction and emission to regenerative and renewable energy. Eliminating the environmental racism that disproportionately damages the life chances of poor people, especially poor people of color here and abroad. The future of life on this planet depends on this fundamental shift. And again, I don't disagree with that. But this isn't a plan. This isn't a plan to do things. Yeah, like, Green New Deal is a collection of policy proposals, but which ones are you going to implement? Which ones are taking priority? What are you actually going to do? Right? This is kind of the problem. And then unleashing democracy. Massive investments in satisfying the social needs of everyday people. Medicare for all, including... Okay, that Medicare for all, that is one coherent policy. Medicare for all. Including humane mental health care, decriminalization of drugs, creation of humane rehabilitation sites, decent housing for all, quality education for all, free college tuition for all, and jobs with living wages for all, abolishing poverty and houselessness, targeting the vicious legacy of white supremacy by ending mass incarceration, demilitarizing policing, abolishing cop cities, and promoting reparations for past unjust treatment of black people. Again, I agree with all of these things. The question is, how are you going to achieve them? Because how is very, very important. Because if you do these things but do them poorly, the effects can be catastrophic. Right? And hey, look, some of these are great. I like this. Prioritizing the empowerment of indigenous peoples, protecting the reproductive rights of women, ending all forms of patriarchy. I just want to know, what is the policy position of ending all forms of patriarchy? How are you going to do that as President of the United States? I'm all for ending all forms of patriarchy. How are you proposing we do that? These are just fundamentally important things that are not answered by Cornel West's campaign. Because ultimately, they know that his campaign is not going to be successful. Securing the rights of LGBTQ plus people and trans peoples, treating every migrant and asylum seeker with dignity, and implementing fundamental changes in immigration policies, public financing of elections with ranked choice voting, eliminating the Electoral College and a national holiday for voting, democratizing unaccountable monopolies and oligopolies with worker control. Again, these are great ideas, right? Democratizing unaccountable monopolies and oligopolies with worker control. Keep in mind, though, that my fundamental position here, right, me, as a content creator, right, my number one, like, political priority, I guess 1 or 2, depending on the day, Medicare for all, and putting democracy into the American workplace. But when I just say, yeah, I want the American economy to be democratically driven, that's not a way we could do that. Instead, that's why I then usually follow that up with, here's how I think we could do it, and then I spend an hour long talking about the reasons why democratic worker co-ops work, how we could facilitate their creation by bringing back postal banking, talking about the proposed legislation by Bernie Sanders that would require workers to be offered the right of first refusal when a company wants to sell to another company. These are actual policy positions to get us from point A to point B, not just like, yeah, I think it'd be a good idea if we ended patriarchy. That's not a plan. So this is what frustrates me about this particular situation. Yeah, the president has a gender equality button on their desk. They can push it at any time. Biden just chooses not to. Yeah, Biden wakes up every day and looks at the button on his desk and says, "You're not gonna get it. You're not gonna be able to touch this button today, Jill." Like, just. Yeah, also LGBTQ plus people and trans peoples are different groups of peoples, I guess. Anyway, all I'm saying is this is not a real campaign, and that is further bolstered by the fact that Cornel West initially ran on with a completely different political party. He was so non-serious about it that he announced he was running for president with a political party that has literally never succeeded in electing anybody. Like, he had to backtrack which political party he was running on, because that's how unserious this is. But there are a lot of people who don't care how unserious he is as a candidate. They care far, far more about feeling ideologically superior and purer than people who vote Democrat. That is the primary thrust of their politics. And it bothers me a great deal because I care about what we can achieve, not what our best intentions were. What party is he running with now? He's running with the Green Party, but he initially announced with, I think, oh God, what was the name of it? The People's Party. He initially announced that he was running with the People's Party, and the People's Party is like literally run by a guy who, when he was accused of sexually assaulting one of his co-workers, fired everyone who disagreed with him and accused them of being liberals trying to take over the organization. Yeah, the Jimmy Dore aligned party. I still thought he was running with the People's Party. Nope. He's with the Green Party now. Yeah. This is deeply, deeply unserious. Anyway, I can't wait for both of these people to rip into Kyle Kulinski for the crime of changing his mind and accurately understanding the political realities of a two-party duopoly.
Spoils the election and Donald Trump becomes president and those votes are taken away from Joe Biden. It is your job as a member of the left and a political commentator that's very popular, explain why that's not the case. Don't just be like, hey, this could cause some criticism down the line. Yeah, okay, what's your argument for why the criticism's invalid? We'll never get to a place.
The criticism of Biden is valid. The issue is we have two real options, one of which is, flawed capitalism, flawed democracy, and the other option is fascism. Those are the two options. Do I really do we really as political commentators need to in-depth explain why fascism is bad? Do we need to go through the entire history of Franco's Spain or Mussolini's Italy or Hitler's Germany? Do we really need to do that? Well, you didn't explain why fascism would be bad in America. Okay, you want to dismantle the military-industrial complex, right? Well, which do you think would be worse? A military-industrial complex controlled by a flawed democracy, or the largest and most advanced military on Earth with one of the largest stockpile of nuclear weapons on Earth controlled by a fascist dictatorship? Which do you think would be worse? I know my answer. It's pretty simple math for me. But, you know, maybe you guys need it kind of like really explained to you guys. So, to appease these commentators, that would be bad because fascism never contents itself with just one country. It seeks to consolidate power within that country before expanding outward and killing any other people who disagree with them, and maybe having the largest military on Earth, the most powerful military on Earth at least, in the hands of a fascist dictator. Maybe that would be bad. Maybe you don't want to roll the dice on that one. And that's just one element of why a fascist America would be bad. If this was Biden v. Christie, I'd give far less of a shit about West voters and rat fucking. Yeah, no, like, if this was honestly, like, Joe Biden versus Mitt Romney, right? Whatever, vote Cornel West, because you know what? I know that Mitt Romney is not going to dismantle democracy. He's just going to, like, I don't know, try to reinstill Christian nationalist principles into America. And I know that lefties don't give a shit about that. You know, it's fine. It's fine if, you know, Christian nationalism gets shoved down more people's throats. That is fine to a lot of far left folks. But turns out you don't get that second chance. You don't get the follow-up opportunity to run a candidate against someone who is a fascist. That doesn't happen, actually, if they have successfully destroyed and dismantled democracy. Romney? Our money? True. Yeah. Can you imagine how terrible it would have been if Hitler had come to power in the United States instead of financially and militarily crippled Germany? Yeah, exactly. Exactly. God. Anyway.
Where we have a viable third party that actually represents the ideas of the left, if the left never runs candidates. There's about 60% of the country that's participating at most. This is not an argument about who's spoiling the election. Cornel West running is about pulling the 40% of the country that doesn't participate in the political process because they don't feel they're represented, because they don't believe in it. That's what populist movement should be about. So any excuse about, you know, Cornel West just being a spoiler and that's why...
Okay, but then you have to consider who is going to be doing the work of mobilizing non-voters. Is it Cornel West's campaign? No. Cornel West's campaign, their pathway to success is not mobilizing unaligned voters. That isn't actually how they get votes. That's not how the Green Party has gotten votes. How the Green Party gets votes is by tearing them away primarily from the Democratic Party. This is ridiculous.
They shouldn't run is just service to the Democratic Party, just quelling any dissent from the left so that leftists have no options but to vote for the candidate that is a little bit closer to their views than the other.
That is how a two-party duopoly works. Yes. That is how a two-party duopoly works. You have fundamentally two choices. And we are now in kind of a late-stage duopolistic system, which means that the possibility for a third party to successfully, you know, rise gets less and less with each election cycle, for pretty obvious reasons. Cornel West isn't running in the primary for the Democratic Party. He's running as a separate candidate. He's looking to pull voters away from both Trump and Biden. It just so happens that Cornel West is going to be pulling primarily Biden voters. Like, the money that the Democrats spend on elections is primarily to try and mobilize people who don't give a shit about politics. And people who would otherwise not vote. That's where the vast majority of their money goes. I haven't seen Cornel West's campaign financials, but I'm going to guess that their primary strategy to get votes is not reaching out to the 40% of people who consistently don't vote. It's to reach out to the people who consistently vote and get them to consistently vote for the Green Party. It's easier to do that.
Other one. That's a state we've been in for far too long, and there have been many candidates that have run to try and shake things up. But Kyle Kulinski's argument there doesn't test against his other arguments he's made himself very well, or the typical views of a leftist. So I just wonder where it's coming from as a political commentator. What makes you...
Where could this be coming from? Maybe it's because he's recognizing the fact that the two-power duopoly is not going to be broken by the time the 2024 election happens. And if the two-power duopoly isn't broken, then you have two options. One option is Biden. Flawed capitalism and flawed democracy, under which you can still continue to organize and make changes for the better and consolidate power for the left. The other option is fascism, and fascism kills all of us. That, like, just point blank. I'm sorry. You think it's hard being a leftist political commentator right now? Try it under fascism, where they will murder you for trying to do it.
You decide, you know what? I'm going to start making excuses for the Democratic Party, actually. It seems like a big switch up, and I'm curious as to where that comes from.
Yeah, he keeps talking about the perception mattering more than the reality of whether or not Cornel West is a spoiler candidate. And I think you're right. He should be the one explaining.
Well, because public perception shapes how people are going to vote. That's why it matters. You know, like the same way, like, you know, public perception of height matters among presidential candidates. Typically, a taller presidential candidate, or at least a candidate who is perceived as taller, will get more votes, because public perception matters when it comes to voting.
To people why that's not the case. If you're not in media to change perceptions, then really why even bother? That's kind of the whole point why we get on these screens and talk to people, is to try to explain the issues to them. Sometimes I learn more from the viewers than they learn from me, to be fair, but that's always the goal. And then also, how are you going to sit there and criticize a third-party candidate as a member of the Democratic Party when the establishment is so hell-bent, it seems, on getting rid of progressive candidates? I mean, they basically stole the primary from Bernie back in 2016.
We have more progressive candidates in office now than we have in maybe, like, I definitely my lifetime. Maybe like the lifetime of, like, you know, since like FDR. You know, like, we have more progressive candidates currently holding power than we have. We're in the middle of one of the biggest resurgence of labor power in like a century. And the idea here that, like, oh, well, you know, like, the Democratic Party is really kicking people out. The Democratic Party is full of rat fucks, and they are going to rat fuck their way until they can't rat fuck anybody else. Okay? However, and this is the big asterisk here, however, the Democratic Party is old. They have to retire, and they're dying. And the more that younger people get involved, Gen Z, millennials, get involved in politics, the more progressive the Democratic Party has to become, because the people operating those levers of power become more progressive. While I agree that some of the positions and takes on the right are building blocks for a fascist system, I think it's disingenuous to suggest we will get to the point where you would be in harm's way. How? How on earth is it equivalent to Tim Pool suggesting civil war? They already tried to overthrow democracy. Like, the argument like, oh, you're being hyperbolic. I'm not. The president, the former president, has 97 charges, the vast majority of which are related to him trying to overthrow democracy to maintain power. The main thrust of their rhetoric, as it regards people like me, are that we are pedophiles who must be excised from society. And the vast majority of their supporters, what do you think the vast majority of Trump supporters, when you ask them, what should we do with pedophiles? What do you think their answers are? Is it oh, give them thoughtful treatment so they never harm a child? No, it's kill them. It's put a bullet in their brain. When the main Republican candidates are on stage talking about ending healthcare for trans people, look, the idea that I'm overblowing this, I'm just paying attention, buddy. I think it's important we don't generalize all Republicans in light of January 6th. I'm not. I'm talking about the candidates that they are voting for. All Republicans aren't fascist, but most Republicans are willing to vote for Donald Trump again, and Donald Trump is a fascist. Again, this is not, what you're doing here is equivocating the electorate with the people in power and the systems in power. Doesn't matter if all Republicans are fascists or not. What matters is the people they're electing definitely are. So again, I'm not being hyperbolic here. I'm just someone who is literally paid to pay attention to this shit. And if you think, oh, well, the guy who tried to overthrow democracy certainly wouldn't try to do it again, you are a fool.
So what is the alternative that Kyle Kulinski would suggest? The Democratic establishment clearly has no interest in listening to many progressives in their party. They clearly are not interested in allowing a outside candidate that they did not handpick to take over the primary process.
Okay, so the reason for this, right, is because within the Democratic Party, what happens is that the Democratic Party makes concessions to the more progressive members of Congress. That's how they get their support in an election cycle where they need to consolidate behind Joe Biden. They make those concessions behind closed doors. This is very likely, by the way, why the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, is currently going absolutely ham on workers' rights. It is, I would say, 95% likely that is directly attributable to progressive members of Congress getting concessions from Joe Biden that Joe Biden then has to act upon, okay? You can push a flawed liberal on policy, which is what progressives have been doing. With mixed success, by the way. You know, we haven't won on everything we wanted by any means, but we have won on some pretty important stuff. Yeah. And well, Biden has been doing really well on the NLRB since day one. I'm just saying, the last few months, the last several months, I think he's let them off the leash. which is, in my opinion, a very good thing. So, all I'm saying is, this entire segment is horrible. I mean, I know The Rising is like bottom of the barrel political commentary these days, but man, I didn't think it was this bad.
So it seems like in some cases, having a third-party challenger is the only way for that segment of the party to have their voice be heard.
Yeah, I think it's dangerous too. You have this guy, Kyle Kulinski, to me looks like a lost member of NSYNC or the Backstreet Boys right now.
I was hoping someone would bring up his frosted tips.
Yeah.
By the way, just full transparency here. The Burnett woman here, she worked formerly for the Daily Caller, Tucker Carlson's news outfit. So keep in mind the criticism here from the left is really from Jessica Burbank, and I'm actually pretty deeply disappointed in her stance here.
Please, we had to. I don't think that's going to connect. You and I are both coming from blue-collar backgrounds. I don't think someone like Kyle...
Oh, yeah. Amber Athey, definitely coming from blue-collar background as, you know, the editor of The Spectator and former correspondent for the Daily Caller. Yeah, such a, you know... Oh, sorry. Yeah, also, Amber Athey wrote a book called The Snowflakes Revolt, How Woke Millennials Hijacked American Media. Yeah, we should definitely trust her stance and opinion that Jessica Burbank agrees on when it comes to which lefties we should be listening to. Yeah, I'm sure.
Kulinski, with 1 billion books behind him and the frosted tips, is connecting with a working class audience. I think his audience is progressives who are politically engaged, which, if you are the Democratic Party, that's a valuable base, because I'm sure those people have blue-collar family members that also vote. These are the people that are paying attention to politics, that make time for it, for whatever reason. That is what they do. Those people are very important in the political and democratic process.
Oh, my take on Mitch McConnell. We talked about it earlier, but Mitch McConnell needs to retire, and the people around him need to be charged with elder abuse.
In the United States, because they will remind their family about elections. They will tell them their views about elections. If you want the left to win, you should be giving your audience the talking points to win over their family members for voting for a leftist candidate. That just is common sense. And so to me...
Okay, but we're not talking about candidates per se. We're talking about outcomes, okay? There are 2 outcomes. Whether you decide to vote for Cornel West or not, there are 2 outcomes for the election because we live in a duopoly. One outcome is Joe Biden, deeply flawed as he is. The other outcome is Donald Trump, who is a fascist and who there's a very good chance will try to end democracy to maintain his power. The leftist outcome to look at are those 2 outcomes. The leftist option is Joe Biden. If you care about the actual outcomes that are possible in the election, there are 2 of them. One of them is Joe Biden and the other is fascism. And it turns out the leftist outcome that we need to ensure happens is Joe Biden becoming president.
This just reeks of Democratic Party interference, Democratic Party consultant going and talking to Kyle Kulinski and saying, like, listen, you know, this is our argument for this. This is why that video we heard you.
Yeah. I'm sure the Democratic Party paid Kyle Kulinski millions of dollars to change his mind. I'm sure. Guys, I've worked in online. I've worked in organizing. I've met Democratic people in this line of work. Okay. They aren't offering Kyle Kulinski a huge paycheck to change his mind, and they're not, like, poisoning him like Wormtongue in Lord of the Rings. People just pointed out to him that the options are either the end of democracy or Joe Biden, and the leftist option there is Joe Biden. I'm sorry. You think leftists would fare better without democracy? I think you are not very intelligent if you think that. Does she even do any type of organizing? I have no idea if Jessica Burbank actually does organizing or not.
And your partner in the car with the sunglasses.
No. Gamer G, she thinks that Kyle Kulinski is taking notes from the DNC, I guess.
On saying this stuff, it's kind of dangerous for us. Here's our vision. I think people who are media figures are susceptible to that kind of influence from members of the Democratic Party. This doesn't seem like it's something coming from a member of the left who wants our movement to succeed. And that's really scary because I'm sure there's members of
shit. Look, I have to be completely level with you on my with my take on this, right? And my take on this is essentially that Jessica Burbank is like half a step away right now from that QAnon conspiracy that we covered, where like she's like, oh man, it's so strange that someone would change their mind. Well, yeah, clearly one of the agents of the DNC got to him and whispered sweet nothings in his ear to manipulate his mind. And that's really so close to the QAnon conspiracy of like, oh yes, the reason why celebrities sometimes act weird is because they've been replaced by genetically altered clones created by the powers that be in order to manipulate us. Like, nah, this is ridiculous.
his audience who listen to what he says and relay it. And so it's not really about the commentator having a huge base of voters who are progressives or members of the working class who are swayable by Cornel West. It's about having a base of people who will go on and talk to their family members who are. And that's really scary as a member of the left, that someone could grow an audience based off of a leftist perspective and then switch up when it's election time.
Yeah.
Yeah, because leftists would never vote for Joe Biden? I'm sorry. My political positions are that we shouldn't have capitalism in America, that we should have democratically driven worker co-ops as the primary means of creating, of doing business in America. My position is that we should have Medicare for all. I believe in establishing the Green New Deal and doing with fossil fuels. I believe in by any stretch, if a conservative heard me saying those things, they'd call me like the most communist person since Stalin, right? But this idea that like, oh well, the only reason you wouldn't advocate for Cornel West is because you're not a real leftist and you're betraying the movement. This is his website. His website it's 3 issues. None of which go into any amount of depth on how he would actually get these things done. This is pure, unadulterated, just political theater. Like, oh, well, you're not a real leftist because you're not convincing friends and family to vote for Cornel West. That's insane. That is just insane. If you care more about how that looks than how that advocacy would actually affect the world, you do not live in a leftist frame of reference. You live in a narcissistic frame of reference. That is your position. It is self-serving entirely. If you just care about how it looks to other people, how you look to other people, you are not a leftist. You are a narcissist.
I don't know much about Kyle Kulinski's background either. I know the woman he's in the car with is his wife, Crystal Ball, who hosts her own program and is kind of considered a member of the progressive left. Kyle was one of the co-founder of Justice Democrats, which is a PAC that requires candidates to refuse to accept corporate PAC money. So I don't know if he doesn't necessarily have the grassroots organizing experience, but clearly there's still some.
You don't either, bitch. I'm sorry. Has this Daily Caller reporter gone out and done grassroots organizing? No, I don't think so. I actually genuinely don't think so.
Inconsistency here, some hypocrisy here, and he's taken a lot of heat on that from the left. So we'll see if maybe this perhaps hurts some of his popularity among the audience.
Yeah, I think it will. I hope it will. Because when you have someone not making a strategic plan for us to gain power to see our political agenda ever enacted in the United States, how can that person be a leader? That's really what this should be about, is winning over either hearts and minds on the issues. That's what, you know.
If you don't have a coherent plan for the future, like, who would, why would anyone vote for an incoherent plan? Why? Oh, yeah, that'd be terrible if there was, if you were out there advocating for an incoherent plan that didn't have any way of actually achieving its goals. Yeah, that'd be terrible. Wouldn't it?
Media presence could be used for persuading people of your particular political persuasion, or saying strategically the way that we gain power is not the way of following the Democratic Party. There's a lot of different ways you can use your public platform, and I think
strategically, why would anyone ever work within the largest existing power apparatus in a two-party system to gain power? That's crazy. Clearly, the only way to gain political power in America is to run on the Green Party. Look at all of this massive list of Green Party candidates that I have compiled that were successful. Oh, wow. You missed it. I guess, it's just, wow. You all are familiar with the Green Party's presidential candidate. The Green Party's presidential candidate, Javier Bardem. You guys are aware of him, right? No, you're not. He's made up. He doesn't exist. There's no person named Javier Bardem. There never has been. I made him up. He's fictional. Anyway.
Building one off of being a leftist and gaining people's attention based off of communicating those ideas in a receivable way and convincing way on a regular basis to counter common narratives and the common media narratives we hear in mainstream media. That's good, that's useful. But then when you switch up on your entire audience and steer them in another direction, it's something we've seen far too often in the left. And I think if you get into this industry, it's something we've seen far too often in the left. Like, with the People's Party, for example, the organization that Cornel West announced his candidacy with, that, was basically a vanity project by Jimmy Dore. Oh, man, it's like poetry. It rhymes. You get into this industry and you make a platform for yourself as a reporter, as a journalist, as a commentator. People will follow you because they trust you. People follow people. They're sick of the mainstream media. They watch shows like Rising and other online shows now. Streaming is big. And it's because they realize that you found someone you trust with a background you respect, and you want to hear the news and what's going on in politics from their perspective. And then there's a lot of people that can be led astray if you decide to switch up on them. It's just, I get that people change their mind, but I don't think that's what happened here, because Kyle did.
I get that people change their mind, says woman who just did a 12-minute long segment about how it's impossible that he changed his mind, because that's never happened before. No, he must have been seduced by the sweet agents of the DNC. Yeah,
Didn't explain, I used to support Cornel West and now I have different thoughts on this. It was a very paternalistic.
I'm sorry. I think there's a big difference between supporting Cornel West in general and thinking he has good political prescriptions in general, and then looking at his candidacy and accurately being able to understand that it is deeply unserious and has the potential to catapult us into fascism. Like, I'm sorry, the equivalency that is being made here is not at all accurate.
Like, what do you think you're doing running like this? And it happens a lot in politics from political commentators, and I don't know where it comes from, but it makes me feel for audiences that have been led astray by, progressive networks and by progressive commentators.
Yeah, man, I'm sure it makes you feel bad for people who've been led astray by progressive networks and commentators. Anyway, let's throw it over to your co-host who literally worked for the Daily Caller.
Tucker Carlson said something in that interview with Dave.
And again, no pre-watcherino. I didn't have any idea that she was just about to name drop her boss, Tucker Carlson, or former boss, Tucker Carlson.
Portnoy, we talked about on this program, where he said he never really looked at his ratings, even when he was at Fox and he was the #1 show in cable. Of course, kind of a luxury not to look at ratings when you're #1. But he said he never really dove too much into the numbers because he was worried that it would lead to a self-obsession and that his show would be tailored based on what he believed the viewers wanted rather than what actually interested him and what he actually believed. And I think that was a good warning.
Yeah, Tucker Carlson would never look at the numbers and tailor his content to what his viewers believe. No, definitely not. He's definitely such a good faith actor, that Tucker Carlson. Yeah, really, Kyle Kulinski here is the really untrustworthy one, but you should trust that really honest fellow, Tucker Carlson.
For anyone who does this media job for a living. That does it for us this week at Rising. Jessica, it's been a pleasure as always to break down the Friday news with you.
You as well, Amber. Another Blue Collar Friday here at Rising.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss.
Fuck this. God damn it. God damn, I hated that so much more than I thought I would. And I gotta be honest, I didn't even really look at I didn't look at any of the clip before I played it. I was 90% sure Brianna Joy Gray would be in this clip. And I'm honestly stunned that it was Jessica Burbank instead. And I hated that. I hated all of it. It was terrible political analysis. And I did not think The Rising could get worse, but I'm constantly surprised. Whew! Drink some water after that. Have you noticed that Cornel West seems only to be brought up where there's something or... Wait. Up where there is some type or... some type of right-wing media on it. I think that more conservative-leaning outlets are definitely going to report on Cornel West when they can spin it in a right-wing way. It's similar to with RFK. They're going to bring up RFK. They're going to bring up Cornel West when they think they can get away with it, because ultimately, at the end of the day, right-wing media is trying to take votes away from Biden. That is their goal. By promoting those people and continuing to have them be relevant, they think that they will be able to peel more votes away from Biden, give Trump a better shot of winning. That's kind of the whole game, right?